me?
Yep.
Okay.
I can.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Okay, we would like to acknowledge that we're privileged to meet on the traditional territory of the Squamish, Lillooet, and St'át'imc Nation. And first, I need a motion to approve the agenda.
That the agenda of this meeting be approved.
Can I have a seconder for that, please?
I can second that.
Thanks, Cynthia. All those in favor? Great, motion carried. Second, there's a recommendation for the minutes.
I can make that recommendation that the minutes of the policy committee held on December 9th, 2020 be adopted.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Yes.
Carried. Excellent. 3 trustee items. Does anyone have anything? No?
No.
Okay. Presentations, we don't have any. Information items, we don't have any. So that takes us down to discussion items. And we're going to bypass A for now, communicable diseases, and move down to B, Board Policy 501, Student Registration, Enrollment, and Placement. And that's Paul.
Yeah, thanks very much. So this one came up from an inquiry that we had from a parent. So I just wanted to make the committee aware that we did have a parent bring to our attention a concern. The concern was resolved. However, out of the discussion, the parent made a comment about consideration for a policy being considered to provide priority to siblings of students who are already enrolled in French immersion. So we sort of considered that and took a look at the policy and some School Act information. And so it just wanted to bring to your attention again. So what happens here is in our current policy, we do have language that says that if a family applies for a transfer to a non-catchment area school, in the order of priority, having a sibling already in that school provides them with additional priority. The School Act allows boards to make that determination in policy. The other thing the School Act allows boards to do is to make the same priority for an in-catchment school. However, in looking at this, it was felt that for in-catchment registration, it would be not preferable to provide preference to families based on the number of children they have. So in essence, it would disadvantage families who only have one child. So in any case, I wanted to bring this to the attention of the committee with that perspective that I would not recommend that we move in that direction. As a matter of fact, this policy is due for review. I think perhaps not next year, but the following year. So in about a year and a half. And, it's something I would like to look into in terms of even the non-catchment piece. But for now, my recommendation to you would be that we do review it at the time that it is scheduled to be reviewed in 2022-23.
And sorry, I'm just going to add that Celeste had a conversation with the same parent, might want to add to the discussion.
Right.
Hey, thanks, Lisa. Rachel, may I? I think I read the policy through really carefully, and I think that the way that it's laid out is fair. And I really did spend time thinking about this at length. And I think that as it's written, it looks fair to me at this time. And so I have nothing else to add. I agree with you, Paul. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm just unmuting. Go ahead.
If I get, I thought the policy looked fine, and I was unaware that a parent had brought our attention to it, but I did notice a couple things in it that maybe are just housekeeping. I don't know if right now is the right time to address that or not, but I'll just mention it, and then you guys can decide if you want to housekeep it. 1.11, where there's the blue transfer application form, it says, for all transfers, the parent/guardian must complete a transfer application form and that to the office. I wonder if there's a word missing there.
And that to the office?
Yeah, it says complete a transfer application form and that to the office of their catchment area. I'm wondering if it just needs the word submit. Submit to the office of their catchment
Yeah.
or
Yeah,
something.
Thanks
Yeah.
for that, Cynthia. I think you're right. There's some missing words in there, so we'll definitely have a look at that. I appreciate that.
Oh gosh, no trouble. Usually I'm the
Yeah,
person
well-
who writes things with missing words.
Yeah, okay.
And then the other thing I noticed on it too was at 1.14, they talked about the walk limits. And the walk limits here are noted as 4.2 kilometers and 4.8 kilometers. And is that differing from our other policy on walk limits that I thought were 3.2 and 3.8?
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you bring that up because just last week, one of our principals noticed a bit of a discrepancy, and I think we forwarded that. I forwarded that to Mo and Arshdeep, and that is being reviewed.
Okay,
So that-
perfect.
Yeah, that was caught last week as well. So thank you for that. Good
Oh,
work.
you guys are so on it. Good job. Okay, those are the only things I noticed. Otherwise, I think it looks like a really great policy.
Rachel, may I?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I don't want to raise something unnecessarily, and maybe I'll just plant it as a seed and then we can decide whether or not there's something here. And I don't think it would just go to the policy committee. So it's whether or not we put it on an agenda in the public meeting at some time, not this evening. But in having reviewed the registration policy and the school act on behalf of this parent, just to double check our work and so on, it occurred to me that the school act permits siblings to be prioritized by the board. And it, at that moment, not having given this a great deal of thought through this lens before, made me wonder if in fact that is appropriate under the human rights law of discriminating against family status for somebody by their family status is not allowed in the law. And it made me wonder if the School Act was in contradiction to the Human Rights Act. And so you're good as a board because you're following the School Act, which is your job. But as soon as I read the School Act again with Paul, I said, it's interesting that the School Act permits prioritizing, giving preference to families with more than one child. What it was intended is just that if you already have a child in there. So, but by nature of possibly having only one child, those families would never get preference and therefore are being discriminated against, or could a case be made that that's true? So my query coming out of that is, I'm now wondering if the School Act needs to be modernized and that piece needs to be removed. And that in fact, boards should not be permitted to prioritize based on family status. And I don't think that was the intention of the language. It was just that if you've already got one of your many kids in there, you get priority over the other families who have many children. but it unintentionally serves the purpose of never giving a family with one child the same rights. So that's my query. I don't know if the board's interested in that topic at all, and I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, does anyone have any comments or questions?
I think that it's a really interesting thing to think about, Lisa. I've spent a lot of time thinking about it, and I'm not sure if today is the time, but I certainly would be interested in talking about it in the future for sure.
Yeah, I think it would be, personally, in my opinion, is that I agree the whole board should be in on the discussion at some point, and the policy's up for a review next year. So with keeping that in mind, maybe schedules a time that we can discuss it before that review.
That's a really good point, Rachel. Maybe we get some answers prior to that discussion next year.
Yeah. Okay, is everyone happy with what they've heard so far on this one? Are we ready to move on? Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks, Paul and Lisa, for that. That takes us down to C, Operational Policy 702, School Generated Funds, MO.
Sorry, I'm going to interject. My apologies, Rachel. Phil is here now. Would you mind if we went back up to A?
Oh. Nope. Nope.
No, that's my
Scratch that.
bad. Yep.
A. No worries. Well, Board Policy 303, Communicable Diseases, Phil.
Yeah, hi, sorry for my tardiness. I'm still working on reading my calendar appropriately and budgeting my time, but here I am. And I think every now and then we get feedback from the public about some of our policies. And back in October, we had been sharing out our communicable disease policy with parents and stakeholders. And we had gotten some feedback from a parent saying that they found that it wasn't necessarily clear in what we were messaging. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what the parent said, and then we can have a look at if we believe that the policy is unclear or not, and have a conversation from there. But what the parent had said in an email was that we would like clarity on Board Policy 303, Communicable Diseases, as in your response to the Sea to Sky Teachers Association letter in the chief last week. You stated that the key message is that public health advises us on what we need to know and who needs to know it. This is not clearly stated in Board Policy 303. Now, if you go down to the third section of the last paragraph in Policy 303, the second sentence says, as outlined in the Public Health Act, communicable disease information may be shared in general terms with staff, students, and parents when it is determined by the school medical health officer that such information sharing is warranted for the protection of the public. That's one piece of information there. I don't know if everybody's had a chance to reread the policy for that context, but there are several references to the school medical health officer within it. Anyway, in accordance to that parent, is it clear, do we think that the policy is clear that they advise us on what we need to share and who needs to get it, or is that something that we could make more clear, or I just wanted to bring this to everyone's attention anytime there is any feedback on our policies.
Rachel, may I?
Yeah, go ahead.
I thought that it read very clearly. What would be the proposed change, Phil?
I do not have one.
We don't think it needs.
I don't think that it needs one at all, but I didn't want to just make that decision unilaterally. I thought I would at least bring the information to you to see, and then if we don't believe that there needs to be a change, then, which would be where I believe that we do not need to make a change, then we've just reviewed it.
I think
So,
it's,
yeah, sorry, Phil, so just with respect to COVID and what's happening with the reporting out on that, from the school district and the Vancouver Coastal Health, that last sentence effectively just speaks to that, correct? Am I correct?
Indeed, yes, yeah, that's a perfect example.
Okay. Okay, yeah, to me it reads well. I didn't have any other questions or anything. Does anyone else have anything? No? Okay, great. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
That takes us back down to C, operational policy 702, school generated funds, Mo.
Okay, thank you. So at this time, we're proposing no changes to this policy. We reviewed it. The last time it was reviewed was in 2019 when we first started our policy review. And overall, just for the board's clarity, this policy is just about pointing out that we do collect school generator funds. The board does do school fundraising. And when it comes to some requirements laid out for donations, and the purpose of school generator funds are for things like school fees, school events, field trips, fundraising, etc. So we are recommending once again that this policy is good, and the changes that were last made in October 2019 are sufficient enough for this policy to carry on.
And sorry, Rachel, just for clarity, the reason I wanted Phil to stay at the top is that this policy down now are all your ordinary policy reviews scheduled for this year. So the first two were meatier and came through parent feedback. This policy and the rest are part of Mo's policy manual review with you.
Okay. Right. Does anyone have any questions on that one for Mo?
Thought it looked really clear.
yep, all good from me.
Perfect. Okay, thanks, Mo. You are up again for D, board policy 705, security of school district assets.
Okay, so just before I get to the rest of the policies, what I'm proposing is if for the rest of these, we're not proposing any changes. We're saying that they've been reviewed, and some of them, in fact, were just reviewed in June, a lot of them. And we did review it again, and at this time, there is no content changes that we're recommending. So with that said, I guess the question to the policy committee is, after we're done the rest of the policies in section 6, starting from the school generated funds and ending all the way up to policy 905, use of school facilities, buildings and grounds, should the board after that just put in a motion, or the policy committee, to basically accept the policies as is, or something like that? We could come up with the wording at the end of this meeting. But I think just for the clarity in the minutes, should we be doing that? I guess that's my question to the policy chair. I recommend we should probably, based on the fact that it just helps with reconciliation and going back to minutes and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, so with that said, what we'll do is Archie will start drafting the motion right now, and we'll just go for the motion, and we'll just add it on to section 7, if everyone's okay with that, as an additional motion.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just one motion. Okay, so with that said, just going over policy 705, school district assets. We last reviewed this in June 2020. And in reality, there are no changes that we're proposing at this time. And a key thing that stood out to me in this policy was if there is any willful damage to our school property, the principal is to notify senior staff, including about the details. And in reality, we have had a few occasions where it's demonstrated that this policy is working. So at this time, we're recommending.
Okay, does anyone have any questions?
No, I think the policy looks good.
Okay, hearing none. Thanks, Mo. Let's move down to E, Operational Policy 705, Staff Use of District Property and Equipment.
Okay, thank you. This was once again another policy where we reviewed in June 2020. And basically, at this time, we are proposing no more changes as this policy was recently reviewed. And just for the policy committee, this policy is all about staff use when it comes to our district equipment, including the fact that the equipment is expected to be secured properly. And basically, for the most part, school district property is not intended for personal use. However, with that said, there's stipulations in the bottom of this policy where it states when staff needs to use school district property, obviously for their professional development or something like that. So it's pretty good. It's very detailed, but it's not. But so in reality, it's not. We are not going to make any changes. And this one is just more of a reference for the policy committee as this is an operational policy. And it's not a board policy, so I was just giving a quick update about that, just as FYI. Okay, so I think I'm done for this one, unless there's any questions. So once again, this is an operational policy, it's not a board policy,
Yeah.
so this is not going to be included in that motion.
Okay. Does anyone have anything on that one? No? Okay, great. Thanks, Mo. That takes us to Board Policy 903, Community Partnership Corporate Sponsorships.
Okay, this one was last reviewed on January 2020. And we looked at this policy and we are satisfied with the way it is right now. So we are recommending no changes at this time. And a key emphasis is that community partnerships should occur when individuals or community organizations provide a product, service, or money to the school without expecting personal or organizational gain. And then essentially it's listing out the detail of when that takes place in our school district, including the fact that I think the board is interested in knowing this. It's that any proposal would go through the office of the superintendent, and then the superintendent would review it prior to going to the board. So we feel that this policy is good enough as a board policy when it comes to the details.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Looks good to me. Anyone have anything they wanted to mention? Okay, great. Thank you. That takes us down to G, Operational Policy 903, Research Projects. Paul.
Yeah, so again, this is also an operational policy, and I know that it is on the schedule to be reviewed. And so I would just let the board know that there are no changes recommended at this time. It was reviewed just about a year ago. It's working well, and so no changes are considered.
Okay. Questions, comments? No. Okay, great. Thanks, Paul. That takes us to H, Board Policy 904, Land Uses Near Schools. Mo.
Okay, so this one, I'm not sure if you guys remember what this policy used to look like in June or before June. So we are still going ahead and recommending that this policy stay as it is. As we last reviewed it with the board, and there was a number of recommendations to kind of making this policy more compact and more just to the point, but less kind of prescriptive. So the board did approve this policy, the amended policy in June 2020. And in reality, a key part in this policy for the board, it's continuing to be there, is basically restrict its attention to basically when there is land use near schools to 300 meters. And that's more for particular uses for that land, like if there's a liquor store or a cannabis store or something like that popping up next to one of our schools. So in reality, we do have an AP that supports this policy, goes into very much detail for Ian and myself and staff to follow when it comes to necessary steps and the meetings that we should be going to find out ahead of time. And with that said, this policy is good with the way it is. It's high level and it's sticking to governance.
Rick.
Yeah. When I read this one, there was just there were 3 words in there that I wondered about. And I understand that we just reviewed this, so I don't really, I'm not particularly determined to see a change. But what bothered me was that in the last paragraph, we used the words oppose a change to, it was proposed developments, I think, within 300 meters of an existing school. There may be special circumstances when the board may, quote, oppose a change in use beyond that distance. And I just wondered whether saying oppose a change implies that that's the only position we would ever take, is in opposition. And whether it might be more accurate to say that we would express an opinion or make a recommendation, because there's always the possibility that there would be a controversial change in property use that we would want. Anyway, that's my quick thought on that one.
I would
I
add
couldn't-
that I think that's a good point, Rick.
Mm.
I had similar feelings.
So I guess we have 2 options, because it's a minor change. Should we do that right now? Or do we just wait till May and get back?
Oh, no, the board can ask for that housekeeping change
okay.
and then still approve it. I don't even think the board needs a motion, but the policy committee doesn't need a motion, I don't believe, to make a small correction like that. It doesn't change the intent or spirit of the policy at all. The board's policy has not changed. It's a wording matter, so it doesn't require a motion.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, folks.
Okay, nice. So we've written that down and we'll make the change right away, and we'll have the revised version put on, the clear version put on the website.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Rick. Okay, that takes us down to board policy 905, use of school facilities, buildings and grounds. Mo.
Okay, so for this one, we last reviewed it in June, once again, and I didn't find anything that stood out in this policy where we would be changing at this time, unless anyone, the policy committee or the board, had pointed out some unclear things that are not there or more clarity is needed. And for the most part, are rental use agreements and the appropriate principles being followed for that within our school setting. And just as a side note for the board, we haven't had a lot of rental use agreements, especially indoors due to the pandemic. But once the pandemic is done, we'll probably get back to normal about that. So this policy is absolutely still needed, but just noting that it's not being used a lot right now due to the pandemic.
Okay. Did anyone have any feedback or questions, comments? No? Okay, thanks, Mo. That takes us down to 7 action items, Board Policy 702, student fees and deposits. Mo.
Okay, so in reality, this entire policy is referencing back to the School Act, and it's emphasizing the clear sections in the School Act that states that boards are allowed to do this and kind of the parameters around that. And basically, with that said, we last reviewed this policy in August 2019. And in reality, aside from just some minor technicalities in section 9, where we basically updated it to when it comes to the board may charge fees for students for, I think in 9.1, where it talked about like technology for education, textile, et cetera. The older version had like CDs and it had like a bunch of things in technology that are no longer there. So we just modernized it by removing 2 line items there, and also ensuring that technology was still kept in there, which it is. So I think it's fine. It's holistic. It's covering everything now. It's been modernized. So that's the only change we're recommending at this time, by removing those 2 things I talked about that were related to technology in particular. Those were like CD drives and stuff like that, or CDs,
Okay.
stuff like that.
Does anyone have any comments, questions? No. Okay, great. So we have a recommendation there. Is someone prepared to make that?
I could go ahead and do it if you'd like. That the policy committee recommends the Board of Education approve the amended policy 702, student fees and deposits.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Celeste. All those in favor? Great, motion carried. Thank you. Now we're at policy review, and there's another recommendation here as well. Is somebody prepared to make that?
Sorry, can I just really quickly, can we just change this to instead of be like amended policies, because we actually didn't amend any of them, we just reviewed them. So Lisa, I may need your help on the wording in this one before the board reads it. So
Oh, yeah.
that the policy committee recommends the Board of Education approves policy 705, then the name, 903, then the name, 904, then the name, and 905, then the name, as presented. So do you feel we need to add more clarity in that, or is that good
As
now?
presented.
Yeah,
Great.
okay.
I think that's good.
That's good. I can make that recommendation then. If everyone is ready, it's good, ready to go. That
Yep,
policy,
thanks.
okay, that the policy committee recommend the Board of Education approve policies 705, security of school district assets, 903, community partnerships / corporate sponsorships, 904, land use near schools, and 905, use of school facilities, building grounds as presented.
I'll second that.
Great. All those in favor? Thank you. Motion carried. Okay, and that takes us to adjournment unless there's anything else from anybody. No. Okay. Is someone prepared to adjourn the meeting? I
That
don't
would be-
see a motion.
I don't think we need a motion.
No. Okay. We're adjourned.
Nice.
We'll see everybody at 1:15.
Yep.
Fine. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
On YouTube now?